GoLoud.
Welcome back to the Weekly Roast. How's it going, guys? How the hell are you? How are your hearts? And of course, how are your heads? Guys, what's going on? How are you doing? Listen, thank you for joining us. Thank you to everybody for all of your support over the last few months. Thank you to everybody who has bought a copy of the book. I've been instructed to advise you that the first reprint of the book has just arrived. Bam. So you can buy it. There's a link below this podcast, but any bookshop near you, you can go out and get the book. The first reprint is here. Let's go. I'm also doing the recording of the audiobook in the next month, I think, which is like 3 days, and then that will be coming out at some stage thereafter. Nevertheless, thank you everyone so much for your support with that. And also thank you to everybody for listening to the Weekly Roast, week in, week out, sending in your voice notes, letting us know what you want roasted. It helps keep the show alive, and your support is hugely appreciated by myself and my trusty co-pilot Kieran. Now, we've gotten the thank yous out of the way. Kieran, I've got something that's been I've had a realisation over the weekend.
Okay.
Do you like realisations, don't you?
Depending.
You're on the fence. That's fine. That's okay. I'll allow it. I was out at a church. I was in a church over the weekend, right? Don't worry. There's not a line of blasphemy coming down the tracks, but I was out in a church over the weekend and there was a choir in the church. I had the realisation that, firstly, are you familiar with church choirs? Are you...
I've heard one or two in my time.
You've heard one or two in your time. Good stuff. He's an experienced connoisseur of church choirs. Never in my life have I seen as many Karens in one place than this church choir. I couldn't quite believe my eyes. It was like the electric picnic of Karens. It was an orgy of Karens, this church choir. It's pretty miraculous to see that there wasn't a haircut longer than a 3 back and sides between them. Genuinely, if you walked within 10 feet up to this choir, you would have been overcome by the smell of lavender, fisherman's friend, or perhaps ambrosia rice, or casual racism. Do you know what I mean? I swear to God, I've never seen as many Karens in my life. If you look at the sort of Karen hierarchy, right? You've got your entry-level Karen, which is somebody who just maybe reports cars to the guards if they don't recognise the registration. You know, if they see a car in the local area and they don't recognise that reg, they call the police. Then you've got your mid-level Karen, which is somebody who becomes an admin on the WhatsApp group for the estate. Then you've got your high-level Karen who starts to get involved in associations and community boards. And, you know, that's the sort of Karen. But at the top of that, the top tier, the Champions League, the World Series, the All-Ireland, Formula One final, Super Bowl, haircut of Karens has to be the church choir. Man, I couldn't believe it. There was a woman there, okay, going at the Hosanna in a way that can only be described as inappropriate. She was ferociously, almost licking the microphone, like a dehydrated Labrador would lick a Calippo, okay? It was the most intense thing ever. Beads of sweat. You could see that this version of the Our Father meant everything. Like, there was beads of sweat dripping down her turtleneck onto her bust. She had a tissue, you know, up the sleeve, which is also, that's a turning point. That has to be a more commonly known turning point in the life of a human being. Once you start walking around with a half-used tissue just in the inside of your wrist. That's an age in itself, isn't it? That is a turning point. That's like a milestone. That's like the equivalent of me at my age having to go for the extra shake of the willy after the urine. I'm that age now. You are, and that's a knowing laugh, by the way. I am that age where I have to really actually go for a full shake, you know? Anyway, man, she was going and going at this, and like, the beads of sweat as we approach the gospel acclamation. I could not believe it. Then you've got the woman at the keyboard. She was She was like tinkering on the Yamaha, but with the head down, and she must have been visually impaired because she was wearing these sort of like Ray-Ban-esque glasses. It was like she was Peggy Goo closing a boat party for Boiler Room or day 2 of Tomorrowland, hunched overwards. Like, it was like she was Fred again. Do you know what I mean? Chewing the gum like Alex Ferguson at the Hacienda, going absolutely wild. Then you had these 3 women to the right. They went into a counter harmony on the Our Father, which was completely rogue. And you could see all the other heads turning, the shrill, less Skrillex, more Skrillex. You could see the heads turning. Like, this is, I swear to God, there has never been a more concentrated amount of Karens in one place. This is like the forbidden fruit for fans of the Antique Roadshow. This is weekend 2 of Coachella for people who have wet dreams about Bradley Cooper. Do you know? And then the conductor, I'm pretty sure was on MDMA. Genuinely, man, her arms were flailing like a jumper left out in the washing machine in the midst of a hurricane and a typhoon. I've seen deaf Italian people communicate using less hand gestures. It was absolutely outrageous. And then, by the way, as always, at the centre, at the root of all what is wrong, there was a man, you know? This Lothario, this silver fox horn dog, who clearly had all of these widows wrapped around his pinky. Come on now, Hyacinth, put a bit of hoof into the hallelujahs, will you? Oh, I'm sorry, Graham. Can we still go for tea and scones afterwards? Oh. So here we are, it's the weekly roast. Enough about pensioners and choir masters and all of the rest of those disasters of the weekend. Now, here we are, it's the roast of bad bosses. Myself and Kieran, of course, have never had a single bad boss in GoLoud or Bauer Media. We love our Bauer overlords, and we are here to work for them for as long as they keep feeding us, keeping the wolves from the proverbial doors. But you guys, on the other hand, have had some howlers. And it's time to turn the microphones over to you to hear about your horror stories with your bosses. By the way, just before we launch in today, myself and Kieran are working on something in the background, which we can't wait to bring to you. It's effectively going to be like a roast hotline, wherein rather than voice notes, we're going to actually get some of you on a call. We're working on building like a novelty-sized telephone, which will be sort of like a big phone, basically, and we want to actually bring some of you involved into the show. Still haven't heard from Mrs. Jollies in weeks. We hope she's still jolly. We hope she's not weak. Now, let's get into it. It's the roast of your bosses.
Hi, Mark. We used to work with this absolute dickhead who we reckon had pubic lice or crabs or something. He'd be constantly fixing himself, or he used to come up to your desk and rub his crotch or scratch his crotch off the corner of your desk. And this wouldn't be, on the odd occasion. It happened on several occasions to several of the people I work with. This guy had a real genuine problem, which, not making excuses for him, but I'm sure goes a long way to why he was such a miserable prick.
I mean, I think there's the benefit of the doubt, and then there is blind naivete. Like, this guy is an unbridled pervert. That's the truth of the matter, isn't it? He did not have pubic lice or crabs, I would have thought, or scabies or any other form of itch-related ailment. I would say that this guy is just a complete brazen horn dog, and the fact that he feels it's appropriate to present his genitals on the edge of your desk and scratch himself like some sort of warthog, and not of the Disney-friendly variety, but of the rugged course running through the undergrowth, snorting shit out of branches and tree trunks. This guy is a hog. He is a dog. And he should be reported. I don't really... What always amazes me with this is where is the pleasure for him in terms of showing... Like, is he getting off on... Like, what is that? Do you think... Does he want to get the person to look towards his genitals? Is he trying to signal towards his genitals? Is it an actual tick? Okay, I'm ruling him as a pervert. Continue on.
My boss thinks that the sun shines out of my colleague's hole because he plays county hurling, and it's sickening everyone's arse, and no one can bother listening to him anymore, going on and on about how great he is.
It would sicken everybody's arse. I mean, that sentence is poetry. That is Brendan Behan. That is brilliant. The county hurling thing, that must drive people up the wall, though. Like, I haven't encountered that, but is it a thing? Do you want to hear a mental GAA fact for you?
Go on.
This will surprise the listeners. My great-great-grandfather was the first ever person to broadcast a live GAA match. And not only that, he was, I think, second in the world to ever broadcast a live sporting event. And he was best friends with Michael Collins, which is true, by the way, because I know there's a bit of saying that you have a family member who was best friends with Michael Collins is sort of like, lads growing up in teenage disco saying that their friend was the kickboxing champion of Ireland. Do you know what I mean? They must have been giving those medals out every Thursday, because I had about 54 of them starting on me every other week. And I always ran the opposite way. But let me just Google him here 1 second. PD. Okay, so here we are. PD Mehigan, also known by his pen name, so he was a writer as well, guilty, was a prominent Irish figure who wore two hats, athlete and journalist. PD's Mehigan journalistic career flourished from the 1920s to the 40s, establishing him as a leading Gaelic Games journalist. He penned articles for various publications, including the Cork Examiner, because family from West Cork, let's go, the Irish Times. His contributions extended beyond match reports, blah, blah, blah. Okay, here we are. The first ever live sports broadcast in Ireland, and indeed all of Europe, was a hurling match. It took place on August 29th, 1926. The specific event was the All-Ireland hurling semi-final between Kilkenny and Galway. The man behind the microphone for this historic broadcast was PD Mehigan, who commentated on the game for radio station 2RN, the predecessor to Ireland's national broadcaster, RTE, which has subsequently remained scandal-free for its entire... But isn't that unbelievable?
That's great.
I'd say there's an element of like, how did things go from that to this? To this gold chain sort of, nevertheless, it would sicken some people's arses. Let's go.
So when I first told my boss that I was pregnant with my first baby, she told me, I knew it. Like your boobs entered the room before you did. Nice, huh?
Yeah, nice one. I believe Kieran followed up and tried to get a picture there, but no, that is, it's amazing. It amazes me how somebody could be so freely confident to make a comment on someone's body like that. Absolutely deranged. Congrats on the pregnancy. But I'm no stranger to inappropriate work comments. The first time I ever got a job in an office, I was maybe 16, and I was just photocopying and scanning and shredding, the most boring, profoundly mundane gig of all time. And day one, Kieran, I was in the canteen and I didn't realise that there was like an etiquette to workplace environments. I was still coming from the background of like a boys' school and just trying to speak. He who speaks the loudest was the funniest, Oh, you're still like that today. Shut the hell up, Cleena. Okay? We're in the office and they started talking about, they're like reading. It was one of those dynamics where everyone's like eating their lunch, but they're half having a conversation, but there's no comment, people are just like reading the newspapers and going, oh, did you see this? And then there's a bit of a patter and then it dies down. Somehow the conversation of dolphins came up, okay? So I just said, did you know, because this is true, and I think I just seen it on Ricky Gervais's Animals stand-up special at the time. I was like, did you know that dolphins are the only animals, aside from humans, who enjoy sex recreationally? And everybody sort of like turned around, they're swiveled around their office chairs, and they're like, is that true? The article was about fungi in the newspaper. And I was like, well, any of the times I've been with fungi, he seemed to enjoy it. And on we go with the roast of bosses. Guys, the workplace can often be a weird and a wonderful environment depending on where you work. At the moment, we're going to focus on the weird. Let's go.
Hi, Mark. So I had a boss before who was very inappropriate towards women. And there was one girl in particular who one day wore a really nice jumpsuit, and he decided he would go over and be like, what would you do now if I just zipped down the front of that jumpsuit? Said this in front of the rest of us working there, in front of co-workers, in front of the customers. Overall, just really, really creepy. Wasn't the first time, but that was the worst one for me that stood out. Would always find a way to like put his arms around her or like touch her in some way. And as a side note, I used this as inspiration for a college assignment, wrote a short play about it, and got an A1. Love you, love the pod.
Love it. A little bit of a baby reindeer. Sorry, when I say love it, of course I don't love it. Of course I don't love anything about his actions. I love the fact that you wrote about that dog and you made a success out of the story. Baby reindeer sort of buzz. That's what I meant when I said love it. Lest the pitchforks are placed beneath my behind. What an absolute animal, Kieran. Would you sort of like to jump in here and back me up in case I flounder?
Dog.
He is a dog.
You bastard.
And also, when she said he made comments about her jumpsuit and then overall was a bit of a dog, was that a pun? Overall? Jumpsuit overall? You know, there you go. Yeah, complete animal. Disgraceful. It amazes me how he's effectively operating on it. He's verbalizing his fantasies. Instead of like having that thought of going, I wonder what it would be like to zip down that jumpsuit. He's just gone up and said it. Horrendous. I hope he's gone. I hope he's absolutely gone. And I hope he continued writing. Speaking of continuing, this one is quite long, but it's absolutely superb. And the person has brilliantly asked us to remove, he doesn't care about anonymity, which I'm delighted about. So we're going to play it in all of its glory. Let's go.
So I used to work in retail in a kind of big independent sort of place. And about 2 weeks after starting working in this place, I was on the shop floor and was going up to the office. And I was walking towards the office and the boss was coming out. And he was walking towards me on the concourse. This is in front of like customers and other staff members. And I'm kind of like, hello, kind of like smiling away at him. He's smiling back at me. It feels like it's the potential for a good like human interaction. And as he's walking past me, he reaches out his hand and kind of just rubs my stomach.
No.
and like, firstly, I was fucking stunned. I was like, what just happened? Like, it's, because I'm not even like that big. I've never had that interaction before with even like best friends. And it's not even 9:30 and I'm getting fat shamed by this guy. But secondly, it was the way he did it, because he's quite a rich, kind of awkward guy. And I think what he was trying to do was like a lad kind of interaction, you know, like he was trying to like go past me, like, Mr. Boom Boom, jiggle, you know, that kind of fucking lad bullshit. But he's so awkward. It came across as like a bit of a stroke, a bit of a caress as he walked by, and played on my mind. It obviously played on his mind as well, that this was an interaction gone wrong. Like, he tried to engineer it happening again so he could do it right, is what it felt like. A couple of like days later, we were in the delivery yard for the home deliveries. I was helping load a van. I had a question from a walkover. He walks over to me and does it again. Like, I kind of just let it happen. So it's just, I'm standing in the middle of the car park and he's just jiggling me, and I'm kind of just letting it happen because it feels like it's the right thing to do so we can both fucking move on from this weirdness. Like, and there was very much that feeling like afterwards he felt like, done, and I've done it right this time. This is how.
That is absolutely incredible. World class. Martha. I think he sort of sounds like Richard Gadd from Baby Reindeer. Martha. Is that it? Is that an okay? Martha, would you like a diet? No, it's terrible. I would not be a good actor. Phenomenal. It's so unbelievably awkward, the idea of rubbing another person's belly in an unsolicited manner. I mean, pregnant people particularly, like, you never do you?
No, never.
No, I mean, obviously you never assume someone's pregnant, but even if they are pregnant, you don't touch, don't you not?
Oh.
No.
Stop doing that.
Yeah. But also the laddishness, there's nothing worse than getting trapped in a sort of cycle of lad esque banter. I remember I worked in another place, and I can't reveal the name, but it was an office in Dublin also. And I made the sort of real criminal mistake on the first day, probably due to people pleasing. But you know, the boss came in and he was clearly like a rugby nut. So he'd be like, "Did you watch the match the weekend?" I'd be like, "Yeah, absolutely I did. Yeah, Leinster crushed it," or whatever, you know. And then every time I saw him in the office afterwards, he'd like pretend to spin past rugby balls to me, and like sidestep me in the office. He'd be like, "O'Gara," and I'd find myself frantically Googling rugby players' names on the way in. So then I'd pass him, and I hated myself for doing it, but I participated in this madness, in this ladness, where I'd be like, "Darcy."
Oh, no.
It's the most cringiest thing ever. And he was getting, like, he was into it. So he'd be like, "Oh yeah, Driscoll," and they'd like sidestep. It's, oh man, it's almost like, do you ever get when you're in a taxi? You have to be careful about admitting that you're a man. Like, it's like this whole I find myself, I'm in this grey area of masculinity where, like, the taxi driver will be like, you're having a conversation and you don't know where the conversation's going. And then he goes, listen, you're a bloke, aren't you? And you're like, sort of. Like, it depends. Yeah, like, it depends, bro. If you're going to say to me, you know, oh, you're getting a colonoscopy this month and you're nervous, and as a fellow man, maybe you could, that's fine. But if you're going to say skirts just aren't short enough these days and you can't say anything and you see those young ones outside the disco, then no, I'm not a man. I'm not. Don't make the assumption because the penis between my legs that are also part, you know what I mean? Anyway, on we go. Boys will be boys, men will be men. O'Gara, slip.
Okay, so had a boss that refused to let me go to my uncle's funeral. Unfortunately, my uncle's funeral landed on Christmas Eve, and if anybody works in retail would know.
Whoa, sorry. Christmas Eve is a bit of a mental time for a funeral, isn't it?
Yeah, that's sad.
That's shocking. My granddad, other relation, other side of the family, died on Christmas Day, would you believe?
Oh.
And his name was Noel.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And he used to always threaten, he'd say, I'm going to go out on Christmas Day just to wind you up. And his last words were fantastic. He was on holiday and he looked out the window and he said, isn't that fantastic? And he died.
Oh, God.
So, let's get back to roasting. Lest the tears mop. Go on.
And if anybody works in retail would know, Christmas Eve, obviously the busiest day of the year. And was getting my stuff to go. I'd had it already clear with him that I could go to the funeral and then come back. Was getting my stuff to go, and he turned around and said, where am I going? I was like, I'm going to my uncle's funeral. And he's like, well, no, you're not, we're too busy. Anyway, he's not care if you're there anyway, he's dead now. I say I was floored was an understatement. Basically, he threatened that if I did leave, he would have me sacked. Yeah, and that I would never work in that industry again.
What an absolute a emotionally subordinate good luck, goodbye, continue. We've got a part 2 to this douchebag.
This boy was wild, I tell you that. Another one's after coming to mind, and I don't know if this is the last one about him because I've had such horrible bosses. But anyway, where I worked, you would have to get the customer's details for the receipts. That'd be name, number, all that kind of jazz. So this used to be the time when Facebook you would have your number joined to Facebook. And what this guy would do with another male staff member would sit in the office, type in the girls' phone numbers, find their names, which is total against the GDPR. Wasn't back then, it was just frowned upon. And they would look up on Facebook and basically rate them from 1 to 10, how good looking were they or how single were they, basically just creeping on these girls coming in and buying our products. So yeah, he was just a grade A fucking asshole.
Yeah. Good luck. Guys, it's been several weeks since we've had an out and out Willy Willy Bum Bum section. So look, this is the Willy Willy Bum Bum section. It's crude, it's crass, it's crazy. I would like all of you with sensitive ears, eyes, noses, or throats, or mouths, or stomachs, or souls, or hearts to block your ears now and fast forward till the next section. But for those of you who like it rugged, those who like it raw, let's go. Strap yourselves in. It's about... Excuse me. Oh God, the nerves, the anticipation and the apprehension are rising up through my mouth and throat. Guys, it's the Willy Willy Bum Bum. Kieran, Willy Willy Willy, come. Let's... And I'll scratch your little silly tum-tum. Good boy. He likes that one. He's purring like a Cheshire cat, my boy. Let's go.
Hey, so I decided to come back from work early from lunch. It was a small business I worked for. Popped the key in, let myself in. I heard, who's that? I was like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, all right. I go, what are you doing? And I could see he peeped around the door with like no top on. And he was just like, I'm having a wank. And I was like, what? And he goes, do you want to join in? I was like, no. I'm happily married. And he was just like,
Sorry.
all right.
I love the way being happily married is the only deterrent from you joining in an afternoon of masturbation with your senior in work. This is utterly bananas. You lost me at the word peep. He peeps around the door. That's as soon as the word peep has been used, you're gone. But then No, I'm actually grand for the wanking, Graham. I've got a husband, you see, so I won't participate. Let's keep going. This guy sounds completely and utterly deranged.
Do you want to join in? I was like, no, I'm happily married. And he was just like, all right then, sure. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, you're a sick fuck. And then he just closed the door, goes, and see you in a bit, screaming through the door. And I was just like, what do I do with this information, you sick fuck?
I think you report him to HR and or the Gardaí Síochána. Like, that is fairly cast iron outrageousness. There's no room for doubt there, is there? Like, oh, I came in and he was shuffling over his desk. Maybe he was blah, 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 benefit of the doubt. This was, oh, I'm wanking. Would you like to join me? As if it's a jacuzzi. The water's nice. Why don't you come in? You know, that is depraved. I hope he is enslaved somewhere else now, preferably a prison. And now, just before we go to this one, guys, this one is of the sort of almost Quentin Tarantino variety, wherein it's pretty visual and pretty graphic what is described in the next voice note. So again, if you are a little bit worse for wear today, in the heart or soul or mind, perhaps don't listen to it. But if not, enjoy.
I had a boss who was the owner of the company, and it was just me and her. She was single and only gave Christmas bonuses out if she was shagging someone at the time. A client pissed her off once, and she said that she wanted to take a shit on his desk and then fuck him with it. Some days then she would completely ignore me. We were in a 2-person office. And other days she'd come in like she was my best friend and we would have lunch together. I never knew who I was getting to come in that day. It was exceptionally stressful. But the money was great. I lasted about a year and then I left to move to another company and dropped about 10k just to get out of there.
I mean, you can't really go from the first thing into the second thing and expect me to just be like, oh, did she ignore you some days? Oh, that's mad. It's not mad. Nothing could ever be described as mad in comparison to the first thing. That's absolutely insane. She would like to, and I'm glad you specified her words, not yours, because that is just what shocking sentences to utter. She wanted to take a shit on the desk and then shag him with it. No, that is just, I'm speechless. Disgusting.
Hi Mark, my first ever boss when I was a trainee in the bank was an absolute perv, and he really kind of seduced me. I was single, seduced me over the period of say 6 months or so, and eventually I gave in because he was a bit of a ride. But didn't he give me chlamydia? And his wife was in Hollis Street having their first baby while we had that ride. Deplorable behaviour, but sure, look, I was complicit as well. But I could write the book on bad bosses, I can tell you.
You could write the book on leaving the TV on when recording a voice note as well, Miriam. But look, we'll forgive that. What I do appreciate about this voice note is that she admits her own involvement. Now, this is the dilemma, and I'm interested to hear what people think. Is she in the wrong? So she has sex with a guy knowing he's married, knowing his wife is currently in the hospital having a baby. I am going to say yes, she is. And I know that some people, and I've had this dilemma before on Instagram, and I think it's coming up in my image article that's coming out this month for image.ie, but the other woman sort of scenario, do you blame her, or do you think, look, it's not her circus, not her monkeys? Do you know what I mean? In terms of she's not involved, it's nothing to do with her. She's entitled to sleep with whoever she wants. It's up to him to have his moral house in order. What do you think? Just going to put it all back on Kieran first, so he has to react first, then I can.
So you think she is wrong?
I think she's wrong. I think we all have a moral obligation to a certain degree in life to just not do the shit thing. And it's not about, I don't know the person, they don't owe me anything, I don't owe them anything. Yeah, of course, but nobody ultimately, as society, nobody owes anybody anything. But it's a case of setting a standard. And I'm not trying to be fucking overly virtuous, because Lord knows I am not. But it's like in that instance, if you're of age, but then again, I don't know. You see, I'm tripping myself up in terms of thinking, because then I'm like, maybe she's not to blame. Maybe she's like, she's just, look, it's his prerogative.
In the interest of keeping this podcast even.
Yeah.
Fair play to her for getting the ride.
She got the ride. Let's go. She got the ride. And she got chlamydia in the end, so
Even
that's
better.
the game. Even better. Continue on.
Hi Mark, yeah, so I worked for this guy. We got on great. Always got on very well with him. Always had good crack. To to preface, I knew he had mentioned once on a night out that he was slightly attracted to me. Slightly was attracted to me.
Slightly.
But I just laughed it off. You know yourself. Yeah. Don't go there, that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And we were chatting away about something one evening via Snapchat. And next thing, out of nowhere, I get a dick pic. Literally out of nowhere, just him standing there, holding it in his hand.
No.
And I just ignored it, laughed it off, not knowing what the bloody hell to do about it. So we moved on. Everything was all fine. A few weeks later, got another one. Just kind of, again, laughed it off. I was a little bit pissed off at this stage, but look, it wasn't doing me any harm in work, if you know what I mean, and that's for a whole other problem story. But I was being favoured because of it, shall we say. Now, genuinely did nothing to kind of engage him at all, but just kept him on the right side on my side, if you know what I mean. And then got another one a few weeks later. Kind of got a little bit pissed off at this point. Very politely said, we kind of had a night out soon after that, and he kind of said something again. I just very politely made him aware that I wasn't interested, and went on 3 weeks holidays. Came back to my replacement, and was then pulled into the office about 4 days later and basically told that my performance was completely lacking an end of month and was being demoted. So I left.
Okay. And in order to understand this, we sort of asked her to describe like what sort of pictures this guy was sending her. And she then explained in detail the types of pictures that this guy was sending.
Oh, Mark, it was so funny. It was so funny. It was literally him just, I think he was outside, and he was just standing there with it in his hand, fully dressed. I don't mean to be harsh here. There's never anything attractive about a dick pic, but there was nothing, there had been no lead up to this. We weren't even like, you know yourself, if you're kind of talking sexy to someone and maybe you can kind of pass it off, but it literally was just him standing there with his lad in his hand in the middle of the yard, his tracksuit bottoms. And we just moved on. I can't remember the other two. One of them, he was in bed or something. But the first one was just hilarious because it was so random and out of place. Like,
okay, just before we get to her, did I ever tell you about the time a friend of mine rang me up and he was like, I'm sexting this girl? And I was like, right. And he was like, I don't know what to do. She's asking for a dick pic. And I was like, okay, brilliant. That's probably insanely rare in a scenario where whenever it's a solicited dick pic. And he was like, but what do I do? And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he was like, well, I've never sent a dick pic before. And I was like, well, neither have I. And he goes, well, like, what do you do? And I was like, I go, so she's asking you to send him. He's like, yeah, we're like sexting back and forth. And I was like, okay. And he goes, so like, do I send it when I'm erect? And I was like, no, man. I convinced him. I convinced him to have a bath. And I was like, just take one after the bath. When it's soft, because otherwise it might look too aggressive. So he just sends her a pic of him lying down in his bed after a bath with his little warm willy slapped over to the left side of his groin. Oh, fuck. I cried laughing for about 6 months afterwards. Unbelievable. Now, going back to this, please do not ever send somebody a dick picture, solicited or otherwise. No, if it is solicited, of course, please do send them. But perhaps ask a good friend of yours for advice on angles, shots, lighting, and all the rest. And by the way, there's an absolute epidemic going around at the moment, apparently, of men sitting on buses, Lewis's, planes, trains, and automobiles and sending pictures of their penises via Bluetooth to unsuspecting phone devices. So, just a warning in advance, if a 2-inch penis is ever sent from a device known as Mark M1990, please alert the authorities because it means that my phone has been hacked. Okay, good night and God bless. Let's go. Guys, thank you so much for listening to the Weekly Roast. It's been a pleasure looking at your awful bosses, your horrible bosses, and all of the things that they have done, did, and continue to do. Now, just thank you, basically. Thank you for your support. Really appreciate it. If you follow me on Instagram at Mehigan Mark, that is where you can submit suggestions and contributions to the show. That is where we decide on the subject each and every week. Furthermore, if you have ideas about things that you want to be put under the microscope, shoot me a message and we will speak to you very, very soon. Look after yourselves. All the best. Take care.